Welcome back to the Defying Gravity podcast with Zach Goodman. Today we are going to talk about the checklist of making young athletes strong. Okay. So my plan today is to basically give you a checklist, give you a rundown of some of the most general training rules and principles that I follow and that you can follow with your own athletes, or if you're an athlete yourself, you can kind of go through this checklist and make sure you're kind of hitting all these things to get some of the same strength results that I get with my athletes. So we're just going to roll right into this. All right. So the checklist of making young athletes strong, there is going to be some components and some principles and things that are going to be universal that everybody has to do. And then there's going to be certain things that are going to be really applicable to people that are younger, that have low training ages, people that I work with. Okay. So while the principles may be the same, the way that we're going to apply may look differently if you are someone brand new to training versus you're someone that has 20 plus years of training. Okay. Again, my population is low training age athletes, right? So I'm working with young kids, 10 years old, all the way up to collegiate athletes that are in their 20s and are, in their prime of their athletic career. Okay. So we run a system across every single one of those athletes. They all run the same system. They all are applying a lot of the same principles. To me, even my athletes that are in their 20s, that are in their prime of their athletic career, most of them have actually not been training that long. They haven't been doing this style of training and they haven't been doing strength training in the grand scheme of things very long. Their training age is still low. To me, if you don't have a training age of over 10 years, you still have a pretty low training age because you have to understand most people get this stuff wrong right when they start. So they don't really start getting good training until like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years in if they're doing this by themselves. And some people take longer than that. Okay. My athletes, obviously, their first year of training is with me. So like they're getting good quality training like day one, but a lot of people don't. And even them, like you can continue to run this style of system for really for the first decade of your training and make great results. Okay. So starting with our first thing on the checklist, training frequency. I talk about this a lot. Training frequency is very important. By frequency, I'm just kind of referencing how often you're doing something. Okay. So as far as like getting strong on a specific pattern or in a specific exercise, a specific velocity range, okay, we basically need to be hitting that 2 to 3 times a week. Okay. So if you want to get a really strong squat, you got to be squatting 2 to 3 days a week. You want a really strong press 2 to 3 days a week. You want a really good jump, you got to do it 2 to 3 days a week. You want a good sprint, you got to be doing it 2 to 3 days a week. Okay. You need to be doing things multiple times in a week because you need to give yourself that stimulus multiple times. The body only adapts to the stimulus you place on it. The more frequently you place a stimulus on it, the more rapidly your body will adapt to it. Okay. So the first thing is frequency. You need to be doing movement patterns you want to get good in. If you want to get good in a squat, a press, a pull, a hinge, okay, make sure that you are hitting these things multiple times a week. Okay. As far as volume goes, like how much should you be doing? Because we're spreading it out across 2 to 3 days a week, okay, you need to spread your volume out across those sessions, right? So if we're coming in and we're squatting one day, okay, and I know that I need to squat a second day in a week, I can't hammer 10 sets of squats, right? It'd be more advantageous to break it up across multiple sessions for a few reasons. Firstly, because you're going to get more output within a week, right? If you basically output everything you have in one session and then you're blasted for the rest of the week, that means you have to wait an entire week basically to recover to then reblast and to reprogress. Okay. Whereas if I do the right amount of work to get the stimulus I want, to get the adaptation I want, and then I can recover faster, if I can do a little bit less, recover faster, that sets me up for another opportunity to then reapply stimulus and get a further adaptation. Okay. The game here is this: how often can I apply stimulus and stress to progress forward? Okay. The more often I can do it, the better. Okay. You can't, the other kind of caveat with this is you can't just do like the very minimal, like just one set and be done. Okay. Because you basically have to apply the right amount of stress, the right amount of stimulus. Okay. And then do no more. Okay. I think Charlie Francis talks about this um, in one of the books. I think I've posted it on Twitter. But basically doing just like that Goldilocks zone of training, right? Doing the exact amount needed and then doing no more because doing more affects the next session. What we want to do is we want to try to string together as many successful progressive sessions as possible, right? If I can add 5 pounds every session, perfect, right? If I add 10 pounds in one session, but then that blasts me, not that this generally happens, but if it blasts me, for a whole week, then I lose out on an extra session, right? And so every single percentage, every single tiny increase I can create is going to add up over the course of the year. Okay. I want to keep kind of a long-term view on this. Okay. The more plus ones I can get, the more plus 5 pounds I can get, the more often I can stack those up, the better. Okay. So volume needs to be spread out. Okay. As far as how much volume these athletes tend to need, okay, let's just use the squat for example. Realistically, your athletes need somewhere between, from what I've found, really 1 to 3 really hard sets. Okay. 3 sets tends to be the maximum of like grindy strain end of set as a strain. That tends to be the maximum they can recover from. Okay, my athletes squat twice a week. So if we squat twice a week and we get, 3 really heavy sets, if we do 4 or 5, they're still going to be sore and beat up for the next session. They may really only need, 3 might be is pretty much the maximum I've found. If I've given my athletes 5 working sets or 4 working sets, that doesn't seem to work as well with what we do. But you also understand we're also doing, multiple exercises. We use a lot of compound movements. So like for a main lift squat, for example, really 1 to 3 really hard sets is all it takes. Okay. Really going over that starts to affect other sessions. And depending on how strong an athlete is, can kind of determine how many hard sets they can do. The stronger they are, the less hard sets they can do. They may do 3 working sets, but 1 working set, it might be, not too hard. They still might have a rep or two in the tank. We might add more weight to the next set, and then boom, they hit that perfect Goldilocks zone of they're straining on their last set. It's a hard set. They couldn't get any more reps, and they completed all the reps they were supposed to, and their last couple reps were pretty hard. Okay, that's perfect. That's a perfect set. If we can do that for a second set, that's awesome. That means they got 3 sets, 2 really hard, challenging sets, and 1 kind of almost like primer set. Okay, and that tends to work out really good. Okay. Um, as far as progression goes, so we've covered volume and frequency. Okay. So if you were doing things multiple times a week, check mark. If you're doing it and you're spreading that load and that workload across multiple times a week, check mark. That's good. Okay. As far as progression goes, I've already kind of touched on this. Okay. But our goal should be to try to either add a rep or add 5 pounds every time we train. Okay. There's really no reason to train if you're not progressing. There's literally zero reason. Like you're not getting any better. If you're not applying more load to the body or making the body do that load for a little bit more, okay, you're not going to see adaptation. And the only reason to train is to get a result and to get an adaptation. Okay. If you're not training for like a specific goal, a specific result, then you're pretty much just exercising. And then it really doesn't matter what you do. Okay. Because at that point, yeah, you're getting health benefits. Yeah, you're getting, physical benefits, but you're not really changing your body. Your body has to be taken somewhere it's never gone before. Okay. So as far as progression goes, that's the minimum. Okay. We want to minimally at least be able to get 1 more rep or to add 5 more pounds. That's a minimum. Okay. Realistically, like for a squat, for example, we should be able to add more than 5 pounds a session, especially if we're dropping reps. So if you go back to my last 2 episodes ago about the brief maximal tension, that's like kind of the layout of how I program my athlete strength. So if you haven't watched that episode, make sure you go watch that. But if we're like dropping reps, so say we went from heavy sets of 6, now we're doing heavy sets of 4, you probably should be able to go up more than 5 pounds because you're dropping 2 reps. Okay. If your sets of 6 were hard and solid, okay, you should be able to go up more than 5 pounds. Okay. Um, as far as exact like percentage increases, I don't really use percentages. Obviously, for me, I'm always trying to add as much load as possible. So if an athlete is prepared enough to add 20 or 30 pounds to their previous session, great. If they only can do 5, fine. Okay. Again, the end goal is to continue to get the same result. Okay. All progressive overload does when we add 5 pounds or add a rep, it gives us the same stimulus we got before, okay, to cause adaptation. Okay. So if I did 225 for 6, okay, I got an adaptation. My body got a little bit stronger. If I did 225 for 6 again, probably not. I'm not going to get the same adaptation. I'm not getting the same stimulus because my body's already learned how to overcome that. If I do 230 for 6, I have about 5 pounds of that. Boom, that gives my body the same stimulus it previously got. Okay, so that is what progressive overload does. It allows us to get the same type of stress by just adding a little bit more because our body's already learned how to beat the previous performance. Okay, if that makes sense. So progression wise, we always want to try to add a rep or add 5 pounds. Again, if you can go over that, because we want our sets to end in strains, okay, you're probably going to be able to add more weight than that. Okay. Um, Again, I see athletes that literally like come in and can take a heavy deadlift. Like I just saw, I have a girl right now that's training with me, and so she took She's relatively new. She's only been with me a couple weeks. So she got a 155 sumo deadlift, not very heavy, right? She's really new to training, really still trying to figure stuff out. She comes in this past week and we get 165 for a set of five. Okay. So like that's how fast adaptation can occur. Her one set of one, that 155 for one was pretty hard. And it was like, all right, perfect. Like we're not going to go up anymore. This is a good starting point. Cool. Next week or a couple weeks, later, we deadlift again. And so, we pull 155 for a set of five. It's just butter, just nothing, right? Just like, I'm like, all right, let's add a little bit more weight and let's get it for, set. And then we're done because you've already squatted. So we got 165 for five, and it was great. Okay. So again, that's a lot of progression, right? All we're chasing is that stimulus that she got previously with that 155 for one. In order to get that same really hard, challenging stimulus, she needed to add 10 more pounds plus four more reps. Okay. The body adapts really fast, it learns really fast. You have to continue to apply more if you want it to result in more adaptation. It really doesn't get much simpler than that. Okay. Um, so our next, we have frequency, volume covered, progression covered, intensity. Okay. You need to be using loads that are really heavy. Okay. When it comes to strength training, we want to be using loads that are near maximal or maximal loads. Okay. So we're talking, if you're going to put a percentage on this, again, I don't program in percentages. Okay. But if you're going to put a percentage on this, we're talking about loads that place you at 85% or more. Okay. And again, we're always using that 1 to 6 rep range. We don't ever go over sixes. We spend a lot of time in that 3 to 5 rep range, but all of our training takes place in 1 to 6. Okay. We'll do some sixes, we'll do some doubles, we'll do some ones. A lot of our training is 3 to 5 reps. So threes, fours, and fives. And we venture a little bit into those sixes and into those singles and doubles. Okay. But again, loads have to be at 85% where they have to be really heavy. They have to challenge your nervous system. Okay. You have to be able to challenge the nervous system. You have to be able to make your body strain. That is how you recruit all available motor units. That's how you create really good, strong, optimal discharge frequencies. Okay. By using really heavy weights. Okay. So that's how you get the most out of your strength training. Okay. So again, if you don't have VBT, if you don't have any of the fancy stuff, literally just watch an athlete set. Does the set end in a really challenging rep? Okay. So like that bench press to where you just barely get it, but you get it. Okay. You complete it. It's hard. You start to grind at the very end, but boom, you lock it out. Done. That was your set. You do a set of five, you know, first set, boom, good. Second set, boom, good. Third set, you slow down, good. Fourth rep, you slow down even more. Okay, not sure if you're gonna get that last one, and boom, you just eke it out. That is a perfect set. Okay, you use all available power and force that you have access to. You discharge all of those motor units. You made your body have to pull from a place it doesn't like to pull from. You hardwired your body in that moment to do more, to output more. Okay, that is what you're doing. You're just inputting a message to make your body output more. Okay. I'll just explain this to an athlete this last week. Like an athlete was like, how do people essentially how do untrained people do some of these crazy things? Like, how does that untrained mom pull a car off her kid or like pull these? Like, how do people do that? Like, right? You see these news articles and papers of people doing crazy things like under really high stress. Okay. Obviously, it's that fight or flight, it's that adrenaline rush. But really, what you're doing in training is you're basically disarming the protection of your nervous system. Your body wants to protect itself, so it shuts itself down early. Okay. By neural training, all we're doing is disarming some of those protection things, protection mechanisms to make our body output more force. Okay. The body will always want to protect itself. We want to disarm it so we can output more for athletic performance. Okay. So intensity wise, that's what we want to do. We basically just want to be lifting really heavy weights and make sure that last rep, 2, 3 reps are slow and you're just barely eking out that last one. That's how we know we're getting the successive, we're getting a successive strength training session. Okay. There's something to be said about sub-maximal weights. I know there's a lot of arguments like, oh, if we accumulate more sub-maximal weights, you're going to get stronger. And like, while that's true as far as like a neural wiring standpoint, yeah, your body's going to learn how to do the lift better. It's going to coordinate a little bit better. Yes, you can put more velocity on the bar. Okay. But when it comes to building a maximally stronger, when it comes to increasing absolute strength, which is the slowest speed we can possibly produce, the slowest rate we produce force, but also the most force we can produce. Okay. You need to be using weights that slow you down a ton. You need to be using weights that put you in a position to where you're outputting everything you have, and that weight is slowing you down to the very maximum. Okay. What that does is two things. Obviously, it improves absolute strength. It's going to improve neural coordination. Your body's going to have to call upon everything that it has, all in a very fast fashion if you're using low reps. Okay. When you start venturing into high reps, the body begins to learn that it doesn't have to discharge force very quickly, it doesn't have to discharge motor units very quickly. Okay. When you use low reps, you teach your body the right way, the way you want it to perform. Okay. Um, so that should cover our intensity. We know how much we have to be lifting. We know as far as progression goes, what we want to try to beat. We know our volumes and we know our frequencies, how we want to kind of spread all this out. Okay. Our next checklist is going to be our rest periods. Okay. All rest periods do is they make training consistent. Okay. They make training consistent. They allow us to output more from subsequent sets. Okay. As far as rest periods go, on main big compound lifts, we're talking squats, presses, deadlifts, sprints and jumps and everything that you do. Okay. Everything that's really big and really taxing or really challenging, hard, potent stimulus. We want at least somewhere between 4 to 6 minutes, can be more. I have athletes that rest 7, 8. I have athletes that have rested 10 minutes to get a set. Okay. Again, I'm chasing adaptations. I'm chasing a number. I'm chasing a result. I'm not necessarily chasing like time efficiency or organization and all that good stuff. Okay. That's cool. That's what works for other coaches. For me, I'm only there for the result of the athlete. I don't care about anything else. We're going to chase that number. We're going to chase that result. We are going to chase that stimulus. Okay. So rest allows us to essentially output more. Okay. The reason that most people can't do multi-set heavy straining is they don't rest long enough, right? So their first set is really good because they're rested. They just warmed up, primed their nervous system. They outputted a ton of force. Okay. And then they crash on the second set. The reason they crash is they don't rest long enough. Okay. They discharge all those motor units, they tax their nervous system, and then they don't rest long enough to allow it to replenish and to basically be ready to go again. Okay. I've shown some obviously like I'm a big rest guy. Like on social media, I always share different things I read and things that I believe and I watch my athletes, do. And I've always been like a big long rest, type of coach. I've been someone that's kind of been a proponent of that. Um, Obviously the research is very clear on that. I have shown a couple different snippets of different books. I know Brad Schoenfeld's hypertrophy book. Um, there's a really good little snippet I've shared on social media a few times. I wish more people would see it. It might stop some of the superset and circuit training crap. Um, but essentially, it's this. Okay. When you discharge motor units, okay, we talked about the nervous system wanting to be protective, right? It doesn't want to hurt your body. The nervous system doesn't want to break the body. Okay. So when you output a lot of force, the nervous system will then down regulate. It'll basically allow you to pull on less and produce less force in hopes to protect itself from the fatigue you just put on it. Okay. So when you do a really hard set, you put fatigue and tax on the nervous system. Okay. Your body is going to protect itself and output less the next set. So every set you do is going to be diminished force producing. Okay. That doesn't mean the sets are not effective. It does not mean the sets are bad stimulus. It just means your first set is going to be your best stimulus. Okay. So knowing that, how do we get the most out of those subsequent sets? If we want to do 3 sets of really heavy squats, we want to accumulate that much work, because sometimes that's how much work it takes to really drive an adaptation. We need to rest long enough for our body to then output more the next set. So I do a really hard set. I might need to rest 6 minutes so that I can do the same weight for the same amount of reps at slower speeds. Or I might even have to drop a little bit of weight. I don't like dropping weight. I'd rather just rest a little bit longer. And if I have to miss a rep, that's kind of my preference. That's what I think is best from what I've seen, as far as making athletes pretty strong. But we need to be resting long enough. Okay. Athletes sometimes get bored. Sometimes they want to go quicker. Sometimes they want to just get it done. Okay. What we need them to understand is they have to rest long enough to get the weights and get the speed they want to get. Okay. Resting is super important. It can be boring. Okay. You'll realize a lot of strong lifters never try to rush rest, right? Because they know they need it. They know they need that extra rest to hit lifts. Weak lifters are the ones who are always rushing their rest. Okay. Part of that is because they're not really outputting very much, so it doesn't really affect them. They can rest 2 minutes and do the same 100-pound bench again. Sure. Okay. But they never really reach high strength levels because they're never really outputting very much in general. Okay. So it's kind of like how, like the sprint coaches will say that fast, like the feed the cats know how long to rest. Okay. It's because cats are producing a lot of speed, which means they're producing a lot of fatigue. They know they need to rest long. Strong lifters are the same way. They know they have to rest long in order to get that next set. Okay. Because they're outputting so much. So again, That's how we maximize motor unit recruitment. It's how we maximize force production in subsequent sets. It's how we minimize fatigue, is just taking long rest periods. Okay. Again, that's a break from tradition. A lot of programs don't like doing that. They try to rush everybody through circuit. They try to get everybody done in an hour or 30 minutes or whatever. I'm a proponent of, if you're short on time, just do less work, but do it right. Do everything right. Okay. Let your time period, if you have an hour, you have 30 minutes, do the things you do really freaking well, and then worry about the rest later. Okay. Instead of rushing through and doing everything really average and mediocre and really not getting a strong stimulus in general, do the things you have to get done with as much effort in the time frame you have. And then if you have additional time, that's when you add extra. But know what know what the meat and potatoes of the session is. Know what the things are really important, right? For me on the lower body days, the things we have to do is we have to squat, we have to jump. Okay. Everything else is secondary and can come after. If you give me 30 minutes with a kid, we're going to squat and we're going to jump. Like, we're going to do the things we have to do. Okay. Everything else can come after. Okay. Um, so that kind of leads into our last point. Our last point in the checklist is individuality. Okay. This is kind of where we start talking about weakness building, right? In a conjugate system, someone that's, conjugate mindset, they're always looking at, okay, what's the weakness? Where am I breaking down? Where am I missing this lift? Why am I not hitting this speed or hitting this jump? Individuality is when weaknesses kind of start coming up. We got to start addressing, like, okay, where am I weak at versus where somebody else is weak at. The good thing about young athletes is they're weak everywhere, and so you really can't miss, right? If you are, chasing, generally, the areas that people are most weak at is pretty much common across the board, because a lot of us have similar lifestyles. Okay. A lot of us sit too much. A lot of us don't walk enough. A lot of us don't move enough. A lot of us don't do a lot of fast things, right? That's just kind of how, like, Western society is. A lot of us have similar lifestyles. And so, like, things like our glutes and our hamstrings are really underdeveloped. Our low backs are usually underdeveloped, right? We sit all day. Our upper backs and our traps and our rear delts, those things are generally underdeveloped, right? Our triceps are usually underdeveloped. So really, if you are sticking with that, okay, after we do our lower body lift, we're going to hit something for the hamstring, some sort of hinge, whether it's, like a glute hip drive or hip thrust or a deadlift or something like that, right? We're going to make sure we're addressing the glutes and the hamstrings. We're going to make sure we're addressing, the quads, or we're addressing the low back, or we're addressing, the upper body days, the upper back, the triceps, the shoulders, things like that. Obviously, we can get into like the individuality of different lifters, but if you're a low training age person, which again, the population I work with is all low training age, they basically have universal weaknesses, and so you can kind of program those pretty simply. Okay. Obviously, as your training age gets older, as you get older, as you get stronger, you have to individualize more. But for the most part, even really, really strong lifters still have very similar weaknesses, because a lot of us have the same lifestyle. Okay. So it's something to understand about individuality. While coaches harp on, oh, it needs to be individualized, like a lot of coaches will sell that. The reality is, a lot of us are not really much different. We all have the same types of needs. The things that work for me probably also work for you. Okay. We're all dealing with humans in similar societies. A lot of us are dealing with athletes that are in similar demographics. Okay. There's not that much difference between what I have and maybe what you have. Okay. The difference is just the training, and it's just like that. That's really the difference. Okay. Um, so again, the training that I do, in my opinion, works for everybody. Anybody can take the things I do and kind of apply them across their populations. Again, I don't have some special demographic, right? I'm in Michigan. I'm in Bay County, Michigan, like as average as it gets, right? I don't have freaks rolling through. I don't have a ton of, just like 6'5" monsters. Like, I don't have kids like that, right? We're in a very normalized, relatively, modern, modest type of demographic. I don't have freaks just rolling through. Okay. So what I'm able to do with the athletes that I have is really comes down to them just working their butts off, and then them doing things the right way. And I think that could be applied to anybody. Okay. Um, so that's kind of my checklist as far as making young athletes strong. If you follow these things, if you follow frequency and volume, progression, intensity, rest, okay, and then you address individual things as they are, become necessary, you really can't go wrong with getting kids really, really strong. Okay. It doesn't need to be super fancy. It doesn't need to be super crazy. Again, follow the principles, follow the things that work. Okay. And keep refining your process. Okay. Don't get into, the weeds on things, on things that don't matter. Don't try every system. Find things work, that work for your logistics, and then just refine and get really good at those things. Okay. That's my best kind of piece of advice to people who are trying to make really strong young athletes. Keep it simple, follow these principles, follow these rules, and refine what you do and improve your process that you already have. Okay. There's really not tons of secrets out there. There's, details, minor details that do make big differences. And those are secrets, but they're really not secrets. They're things that I'm putting out, other people are putting out. There's people are passing over them. Okay. So that is it. Okay. If you have any questions about anything that I, provided, anything on the checklist, okay, let me know. Um, as always, I appreciate you guys listening to the podcast. Okay, it makes it fun for me when I get questions. Again, I just talk about things I like to talk about. This kind of popped in my mind like an hour ago. I'm like, cool, let me sit down and talk about it. That's the way I prefer to do it. I just like talking about things I want to talk about. Um, so again, if you have questions about certain things, let me know. If there's topics you need me to cover, let me know. Okay. I really try to be a good resource for people who listen to this. I really try to be helpful when people message me. I try to get back to everybody as much as I can. So again, if you have those questions, reach out to me on Twitter or X and reach out to me on Instagram. Um, and I'll try to get back to you. Okay. Thank you so much again. Peace.